Hello and welcome again to BRAIDAR, the Business of Beauty. I'm Jade and welcome to our fourth episode. I really can't believe that it's the fourth one. At least I think it's the fourth one. But anyway, I'm so happy to be doing this right now. And today we are going to be talking about something really interesting, which is the democratization of beauty in terms of what kind of ideas of beauty there are and how the internet has played a role in that sort of change. So I'd like to start this discussion by talking about aesthetics and just the idea of how they've become almost commodified, I think, in recent years, largely with the help of like social media and just the changing sort of pop cultural landscape in terms of how people consume and also create certain like iconography and remix certain things into like they create new meaning out of existing things. And it's just like, I think it's very subjective, but then there are these central tenets in different aesthetics that a large group of people can sort of relate to, be it in terms of nostalgia or like aspiration, things like that. So if you think about aesthetics like fairycore, for example, the kind of like woodland, mystical, ethereal kind of iconography, it's something that largely people can map onto their own ideas of what that should look like in terms of there's a broad theme and then it's up to the individuals to kind of add their sort of flavor to it and express that in the way that they feel is authentic. And that's just using just a random aesthetic as an example, but it still stands that it's, I don't know, it's just a very interesting way of conceptualizing beauty. Because another key thing about aesthetics in general is that this whole rise of like conceiving of a personal aesthetic as something core or something like, you know, indie sleaze or ballerina sleaze and different sort of branches of off of like different core aesthetics and that continual evolution of aesthetics and things like that. I think that the fact that that has come from quote unquote the people rather than like the fashion industry or major fashion houses or retailers kind of feeding that in a top down way to people, I think that that's very interesting. And I think it points to the larger, again, as I said, like more of a co-creation type of cultural climate that we're in terms of like how people respond to brands and how people sort of choose what elements of, I guess, like, I wouldn't say artifice, but they choose what elements of pre-constructed, be it beauty or fashion or lifestyle, that they want to engage with. It's no longer like, these are the set elements that have to be done, and this is all, you know, you just take it or leave it like that. It's not like, oh, I was reading whatever magazine, like Tiger Bee or whatever, and they said that, you know, it's red that's in this season, or it's red with little flowers on. If you don't have that, well, sorry, you're an incomplete human being and you failed at fashion and subsequently like life in general. It's more like it's more fragmented nowadays. And the fragmentation is coming from a bottom up perspective. So it's like starting in the like someone might make a TikTok or someone might put something on Pinterest or on Instagram, and then that gains sort of traction. People are sharing it, and then like a hashtag forms around it, and then a gradually like a whole sort of movement forms around it, and an aesthetic forms around it, in that they have that buy-in from other people. Like something that we're learning in our leadership module in management this semester is how, in terms of when you think about a movement or when you think about something that's inciting change or like a certain behavior, the key things to consider are, number one, like the actual buy-in. Like, are people subscribing to this, be it ideology or this motivation, this goal? Does everyone have a clear idea of what the end goal is? And I guess in the case of aesthetics, it would be like the end look or the end like lifestyle. Yeah. And then another core thing that you have to consider is the role of the followers in terms of any movement has may have a leader or like some leaders, and then they've obviously got the majority of people who subscribe to the movement, who give it that traction and who give it that popularity. The role of the followers is really undermined, but is really as important as that of the leader, because without people buying in and actually subscribing to what you're putting out there and then putting their own spin on it and then posting their own version, and then that co-creation sort of cycle continues. I think that I think that's just the actual fuel for different social movements, of which aesthetics are some, I believe. So yeah, that's a really interesting thing, and I think it's something that obviously we've seen in the past few years. Like, I think, for example, the first time I personally noted it was in like 2017, 2016, 2018, when streetwear was going like very mainstream, and major sort of luxury fashion houses were tapping into that and were actually like they were doing their own takes on it, but more so I'd say like almost co-opting like the key iconography of certain like subcultures and that, I guess, generalist picture of streetwear and like the core items that you might think of. They were kind of making that their own, in that they were making it what do you call, like, on the runway, you know, they were making it that runway channel of consuming fashion, rather than that sort of subcultural, like, sort of, if you know, like surprise drops, that kind of thing. They were kind of taking it in another direction and co-opting that sort of, those sort of cultural like, I guess, ways of engaging and transferring it onto their business formats, which I think was largely successful because it also coincides with a larger move of pop culture in general towards more like I'd say largely like hip hop inspired aesthetics, and, you know, consuming that whole like hip hop baller lifestyle, like, oh, you know, look the part, fake it till you make it, that kind of thing. And also it just reinforces again that sense that this is the favorable, you know, the favorable way of living or looking or behaving at that moment. And so it just is reflected in other brands being like, okay, how can we tap into this? How can we tap into the like zeitgeist of the moment? And I guess that's how a lot of the luxury fashion brands found their way of doing it. So another thing is the fact that with the rise of aesthetics, it could be argued that there's also a sort of, I don't know, dual sort of effect going on, in terms of, on one hand, aesthetics allow people to kind of rebel against that top-down, like, drip-fed idea of fashion for a particular like demographic, like whether it's a particular brand or particular publisher or particular like notable figure saying, oh yeah, if you're a teen, this is how you should dress, this is what's in for you. If you're if you're Gen X, this is what you should be doing now. You know, if you're like a millennial, this is what you should be doing, or else, you know, what are you? It's now more people being like, we can decide for ourselves, and not only can we decide for ourselves, we can decide, like, we can construct that, like, exactly the thing that we want. And so I think aesthetics allow for a lot of that, like, individuation and like fighting back against that whole narrative. But at the same time, I would say that there's another side of aesthetics which it's not sort of like, it doesn't happen all the time with all aesthetics, with all people, but I think it would be hard to argue that there isn't a sort of unintended detrimental effect, which is that I think the more aesthetics become like mainstream and the more traction they gain in terms of like being, you know, just getting more and more popular among a particular target audience or target demographic, then the more commodified that aesthetic becomes. and this is just by nature of like, again, that whole thing of brands do want to tap into the zeitgeist. They do want to make sure their offerings remain relevant, and so they want to be agile enough to tap into trends. But then also just the fact that in a movement, it gets to a certain like it gets to a certain critical mass where your movement ends up resembling the institutional like structures that you were like rebelling against, and like trying to make something completely different from, which I think is what I think that's part of where the source of like aesthetics becoming rather stifling and rather that instead of fostering self-expression and fostering creativity and community, it then gives the effect of being prescriptive and being exclusive and being something that instead of working to help you to express yourself as as you perceive your true self to be, it's more like something oppressive and like mandatory in terms of like you have to hit all these elements of the iconography, otherwise are you really doing it? And like that whole nature of acceptance by the group, or rather like group validation, also being a part of especially internet-based subcultures. So that, yeah, that's sort of all these things are like going on at the same time and like overlapping each other. And so I think it's a really complex topic in terms of like there's no black and white way, I'd say, to conceptualize aesthetics and their rise. But I think that it's definitely impacted how like Gen Z, for example, views fashion and views like self sort of self actualization, because I think it's one of those things that kind of bleeds from the online world into real life, in terms of like obviously online you get the inspo, you meet people, you find out about these things, and then you're inspired to go to like the thrift stores in real life, for example, to get that like that Y2K skirt, or to get that grunge like, I don't know, distressed denim piece or things like that. So, and then from that, the fact that you're now like you've kind of bought into those signifiers of a certain aesthetic or subgroup, then naturally what happens is that people are able to spot themselves like quote unquote in real life and congregate as like in person social groups rather than just like online ones, which then obviously like overlays all the sort of dynamics I was talking about with aesthetics. It overlays it onto like a school setting, for example, or a university setting. And it's just that element of social segmentation that, you run a risk of inadvertently like fostering, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's almost like, how everyone in all those teen movies, like especially the American high school movies, they'll have their lunchroom or outside the school building with the different like picnic tables, and it'll be like the jocks on this table and the cheerleaders, and then it'll be like the theater kids, and then the skaters on one side, and then the nerds on one side, and then the geeks on the other side, and then all these super segmented, super specific kinds of like embodied identities. And I thought it was always funny because growing up, all like my friends and I would say, yeah, but this is not how it is. This is not exactly representative of our experience. Like, not saying this is not realistic for, I don't know, maybe in the person's town, the creator's hometown, their own experience, that's what they saw. But for us, and I think for a lot of, at least like the people that I've spoken to within my like, cohort, like if you want to call it Gen Z, or if you just want to call it like age bracket, I don't really know anyone who's experienced that sort of almost a caricature of highly divided and like mutually exclusive social groups that are crucially signified by the dress and signified by like how you do your hair or your makeup, or how you like embody that identity through these like material things. So I think the the material aspect of it is definitely very interesting, and it's almost like with aesthetics, you're kind of bringing things full circle, even though that's not the intention. And it's like you're going from media to like the representation of life as we are perceiving it, which is, as I was saying, like not, we notice the difference between the media and like how our high school experience was. But then now it's like coming back around and being like, okay, if I watch, I don't know, if I watch the Bratz movie or if I watch some other high school movie, I can see similarities between their experience and my experience. This is like in the voice of someone who is experiencing that effect in their high school at the moment. Because I know we're in uni now, so it's kind of different. But I would argue that you can still see those changes happening, just as a bystander. You know, you don't have to actually attend that institution where it's all like occurring. So yeah, I definitely think that's quite interesting, and I think that it's just, I think it calls into question the idea of, like, I suppose, passively consuming, not just content, but passively consuming, like, behaviors, I guess you could say, or embodied sort of identities, but more so behaviors, I'd say. It's more like how the more you view a certain type of, let's say, certain TikToks that are from a particular perspective, the more you're kind of like training your own brain to recognize those patterns, and then like building off of that pattern recognition to associate those patterns with, you know, a particular way of being. And if you're someone who's sort of, I think, not easily swayed, but if you're someone who's kind of looking for that sense of self and sense of like position in terms of like the world in a larger sort of social context, then it's very easy for you to subconsciously start picking up those behaviors and internalizing those behaviors as the way you should move through the world. Like, for example, a certain, like, if it's a certain aesthetic in terms of makeup, the more you see that reinforced in media, in like not just online, but like billboards and like, I suppose, celebrities and on television and on the like UGC that you're consuming, especially with the UGC, because that's like all about people who are relatable and like quote unquote like you. The more you kind of come to accept subconsciously that, oh yeah, that's what's cute, that's what, you know, that's the thing, that's what I should be doing, even if like when you sort of analyze it and think about it more, I'd say, like, rationally, you know that you yourself may not like that style, but it's still, I think, like an intuitive sort of like you defer to that as like, oh yeah, like, yeah, I know that's the reigning thing. That's something I accept as just as a status quo. And I think it's definitely an interesting social phenomenon. And yeah, it's one that, especially if you're, again, like as I said, someone who's, I don't know, just like searching for that, the way that you want to move through the world and to express your identity, and you haven't quite like found a way that clicks. I think, yeah, just the effect of that passive consumption, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing, obviously, because there's some things you have to, like, you may have to consume passively. Like, I don't know, if you're watching television, I'm not saying like as you're watching it you should be recording your reaction, you should be like, I don't know, writing your own version of the show like as it's happening, and then you should like always be responding to something all the time in order for your experience with it to be valuable. I'm also mean like more like being aware of when you are passively consuming something, or rather like passively consuming something but with the mind to, like, I don't know, just being aware of like the biases in the different forms of media that we consume. Even if it's like an unconscious bias, it does still affect you're thinking, I feel. So it's just something to be aware of, especially as the world moves more towards like UGC, more towards like short content, more towards micro influencers and things that have the appearance of relatability and the, you know, all the hallmarks and the things that our brain uses as heuristics for something that can be trusted and be like, you know, taken as is and at face value. The more that's become like the more capitalism hones in on that, the more we have to sort of be mindful. Yeah, just be mindful, I guess, is what I would say. But it's definitely very interesting. And yeah, I suppose the flip side of that would be the whole, like, instead of looking at like passive consumption, we look at a more dynamic and a more like active role in the creation of media and of content. I know some people get angry, like, oh, well, you know, I hate that videos are called content now. I hate that everything has become content, and I do hear the argument behind that. But I'm just going to use the word content because it's easier than like just racking my brain for like a million other synonyms. So we're gonna refer to content in this, but just, you know, just keep that in mind. So I think that it's very interesting how, again, like coinciding with the rise of aesthetics and maybe even like the thing that facilitated the rise of aesthetics in the first place is this whole rise in the democratization of like being a creator, like literally the democratization of creating content, of creating different forms of media, and crucially, which feature the perspective of that, you know, normal person who's now become a creator. Because it's one thing for a normal person to create something that is like representing a brand's agenda, for example, or is representing an institution's agenda, but for it to come from within and your sort of like how your lens on the world has colored whatever the original like source material was, or even if it's just like the source material is life in general and your experiences of life. I think the fact that it's so easy to share that now, and it's so easy to sort of build up a following based on that has really facilitated a lot of shifts in the way that, yeah, I think the way that we largely as a society consume and just conceptualize different things, and again how brands choose to tap into that and remain relevant in an age where we're trying to like because you know in democratizing the process, you're taking away some of that power from the like traditional institutions, and so they also have to find a way to like reevaluate their role in this whole ecosystem, and I think they're trying to do that by one, tapping into like the aesthetics and the trends and the micro influencers and the creator economy and all these things, but they're doing it in a way that, because this is what I think the more that they kind of engage with it on this level of we still want to appeal to you, the more they're learning so that they can apply it on the level of let's gain back our influence. Like, let's understand this new terrain, this new frontier, this new way of working, but we want to understand it so that we can create a way within this new system that we can leverage our institutional like advantages and gain back that sort of mind share, so to speak. So that's what I think. I think that's what you see now with like more just, this is another topic. This is going to go into another discussion, but suffice to say, I think you can see signs of that happening now. And what I was going to say about this whole rise of like creators and particularly UGC, it adds a sense of, as I said before, like relatability, of trustworthiness, because you can kind of see your own experience mirrored in the content that you're consuming, which I think kind of makes you like put your guard down, and which is why UGC is so effective compared to like maybe doing a collaboration with a huge influencer who like their audience is beginning to get a bit skeptical, a bit like critical of, you know, this this new product that they say, oh, I use it every day, every time, like, wow, it changed my life. Like, my dog even uses it. Like, it's good for every single person in the world, and that you should totally buy it. Like, it's becoming a bit cliche now, and it's becoming a bit like transparent, as in people no longer believe that you use this product every day when you've never mentioned it in your like vlogs, for example. So what UGC does is that it actually taps into the like the down to earth, sort of relatable, everyday you nature of vlogs and applies it to an advertising setting. So it's almost like a hidden advertisement in like a like in like a vlog format, or in like a almost like you're snapping your friend, almost like that informality, that in the moment candid nature, but it's actually an advert. So that's a clever way of brands getting around that sort of fact of they're not positioned as like individuals, but they want the ease of access to your mind share that being a relatable individual gives you. So I think that, yeah, I think it's just very interesting how aesthetics allow you to, I think, find, in the case of fashion, find pieces that you like more easily, in terms of you, like, kind of, if we were to remove aesthetics from the whole conversation and pretend that they don't exist, it's way sort of harder to find a piece that you like based on another piece if it's not like the exact same thing, if you get what I mean. For example, let's say you like a particular jumpsuit, like a silver jumpsuit, and you're like, oh wow, like I want to find other pieces that are like this, but not like this in the terms of like it's another jumpsuit, or not like this in terms of like it's silver. You want something like this that has the essence of this, that has the like the vibe of that, like whatever moment, whatever memory, whatever like sort of goal or aspirational desire that that's tapping into, you want other things that tap into that. And that is what aesthetics allow you to do really quickly, because again, it's been pre-curated by the other people within the subculture. So it's like that built-in recommendation system, and that built-in like almost like a built-in sense of fashion for you if you want to like explore something new, which again, it gives you ease, it gives you convenience, it gives you a sense of belonging, but also it kind of like delegates the role of your own, I guess, taste making to some degree. Because obviously, like within an aesthetic, you can still handpick the bits that you like oh, I don't like, I don't like this, but I like a bit of that, and I like a bit of that. But then it kind of delegates that beginning process of like the discovery, and like, it delegates a portion of that whole taste making to other people. And then you're like interacting with what's left based on their pre-screening or their first layer of taste making that kind of funnels things. Because obviously the more people curate a set of fashion pieces, or a set of like symbols in terms of like iconography of a certain subculture, the more hands it goes through in terms of curation and like what's it called, going mainstream, and it gets sort of changed and mutated and quote unquote like refined, even though that's not the exact word I'd want to use, but you understand what I mean. The further down those symbols and those pieces and that whole iconography goes, in a like the further down a funnel that goes, in terms of like less and less and less for whoever encounters it at that like any particular stage of the funnel has to work with. So it's just interesting. And there was something else I was going to say, but then I got sidetracked. What was I saying? The funnel, the delegation, picking your own fashion sense. Yeah, I think the fact that other aesthetics can spin out of like one particular aesthetic is also very interesting, in that if you're really sure that you love a particular aesthetic in terms of like it reflects your sort of an aspect of your embodied identity, because obviously like there are different aspects of your identity that might be more salient at one time, and it's not a constant thing. It's something that's in flux, something that's flexible, and something that like is multifaceted. This is, by the way, this is from my management module like last year, so shout out to MN3 102, I believe it was. That was a great module. But anyway, so yeah, the fact that it's in flux and something that has like different facets, and those facets have different levels of salience at different given times, means that the offshoot aesthetics of your, like maybe your favorite aesthetic, for example, are very useful in terms of you being able to communicate that through like the signifying power of clothing or of makeup or of hair or different things. So like, you know, fairycore, for example, might have fairy grunge, and you know, Y2K might have cyber Y2K, it might have um, like McBling kind of aesthetic, it might have cyber styling aesthetic, it might have all these kind of offshoots that all tap into a different sort of shade of the same color, or different like like yeah, a different side of the same shape or a similar shape, which I think it's cool. I think even from a branding perspective, it's very cool. Like kind of going away from the whole identity and like personhood aspect. From a brand's perspective, it's very cool because you can kind of like you're able to map your brand onto your target audience persona, like customer avatar, very, very effectively. Like it's almost like it's making it easy for you, because you know how with the customer avatar you have to search, well, I'm assuming you know, but basically a customer avatar is something that is part of the research process for people when they're making like a startup, or brands when they want to like find out who they want to target with their products. Like, who are we making this for? Whose problem are we solving? Who's our customer? They make a customer avatar, which is essentially like um kind of like a character that you make up, and you give them traits and aspirations and likes and dislikes and an age and name and like occupation and everything about their life based on the research that you've done. Like if your research is saying that, I don't know, vegan ice cream is, is it's popular, or it meets the particular pain point of millennial families, millennial parents in a particular neighborhood, you then go and like either do interviews with those parents, you do research, you like start talking to them, finding out about like their shopping habits, maybe their eating habits, their preferences in terms of flavors of ice cream, and that data that you gather on them, you use that to make your customer avatar. So your like character that you're making is based off of your research. And so what these aesthetics do, and the hyper sort of specificity of the aesthetics, what that does is that it kind of condenses that whole customer avatar into something that's like almost like a prefabricated customer avatar. So if you know that your audience fits a particular, like you just know the vibe, like from your research, you know the vibe, but you just don't know the specifics in terms of like, what should I write for the customer avatars? Occupation, or like, no, occupation is not a good example, because from the research, like the interviews, hopefully you've been asking them what their occupation is. But if you want to write like, what's their favorite color, or that, those kind of things, those more like subjective, personal taste type of things that maybe you didn't ask them in the interview, it just doesn't come up naturally, or something like that you don't have the data for. If you can map the research and the interview like data onto, like, let's say you have an aesthetic, right? If you can map the research data and the customer interview data onto most of the points of the aesthetic, like if it's matching up that the aesthetic is, concerned about like I don't know, Gothic, American suburban Gothic architecture, and then your data and your research has found that the millennial parents you're interviewing, they love that aesthetic for their houses or something, like, and if you do that for enough of the data points and map that onto enough of the points about the aesthetic, then the gaps, you can just use those whatever the aesthetic has that the data doesn't have, you can use that to create the customer avatar essentially. So I think it's really useful, and it's something that I did as well with my business with BRAIDAR, and it really helped a lot. And you might be thinking like, oh, but what if what if I do all this work on the customer avatar and I make it and I've done I'm based on the research and I've used the aesthetics to fill in the gaps, but it's still like I'm scared like it's not accurate. Like what if it's just like what if it ends up just in effect being like I've just created this random character that has nothing to do with the audience, they don't resonate with, it doesn't reflect them. Well, what you can actually do is you test it with them. Like from what I found, like working with the St. Andrews Entrepreneurship Center and everything, and just like I guess research on my own and things like that, just as I'm trying to develop my business, is that anything you're trying to do and that you're not sure of, or even before you like try and do something, just ask the customers. Just once you've found your target audience, once you've like located a group of people who have a problem that you feel, and then you feel you can solve it, just keep on asking them stuff. Keep on testing stuff with them. Keep on like gauging their reaction and literally asking them for their opinions and feedback on whatever that thing is. For example, with the customer avatar, I guess it's a bit like counterintuitive and a bit weird if you have like maybe a sketch of the avatar and like all the like data points about them, and then you show them the paper and you're like, is this you? Do you resonate with this? Like I feel like that kind of defeats the purpose, because one thing about the customer avatar is that it's meant to be like not a secret, not hidden, but it's meant to be like, just a bit, just meant to kind of style it out in terms of like you're making your stuff for that person, but you're not exactly like showcasing who that person is. It's like you're just tailoring your stuff to that. It's a bit of like finesse, a bit of subtlety in how you use it, but it is a crucial part of the whole like brand building and the whole like going from customer discovery and like market research to building your like product and your like prototype. So it's not exactly something that you want to show the people and then ask them that like directly about that. But what you can do is that you've got the customer avatar and you've got like obviously the data that maps onto that. What you can do is you create something for that customer avatar. So let's say like if you think about like a show like Project Runway, they're always given briefs or themes that they have to create the looks for, and the special guest who's like the judge for that week, for example, might say, oh yeah, make it for me, like I'm going to this gala, I'm doing this and that, I like this, I don't like that. So those specific asks are what they're tailoring their product to or whatever they're making to. Similarly, with a customer like avatar, if you want to, the way that you can test it with the real consumers is that make something for the customer avatar and their likes, their dislikes, the data around them, their like, what the aesthetic is saying they like in terms of trying to not use the word aesthetic again, but I guess that's the best word, like the aesthetic for your website or the product or whatever it is, like the design, yeah, and the like user experience and stuff. And then once you've made that, you've made something for that customer avatar, you then take that something that you made and show the real customers. And their reaction to that in terms of like maybe their reaction to the design or their reaction to the functionality in terms of like how well it addresses their pain point, that's how you gauge if your customer avatar is working. Because that's what I found as well. Like, for example, with the design of the BRAIDAR prototype website, I spent most of the summer working on the BRAIDAR, like, just, to be fair, it was mostly like the concept of the business and like the name. But within all that, I was still considering like the aesthetic, the larger aesthetic of the person who it's for, and trying to really pin down like who is that customer, like what is that customer avatar that I'm making the stuff for. So I did a lot of drafts of the customer avatar. I did a lot of research into like how to do that essentially, and the things I came up with, I used that to make that prototype and show the prototype to some of my friends and just new people that I met who were really interested in the concept of like getting beauty services, or students who had like beauty side hustles themselves, and their feedback to like the design and stuff like that. I was really happy to see that it was resonating with them and something that appealed to them. And I think in that's how you validate your customer avatar. So yeah, I think aesthetics are a really useful thing for branding and marketing, and I feel like in the future, the more maybe the more mainstream it becomes, and I'm just saying mainstream in the sense of like, I feel like aesthetics are very well understood by like a certain demographic, like a certain age cutoff, even though it's not like a hard and fast rule, but you get what I'm trying to say. Like digital native kind of generations are more like, we see it more often, we engage with it more, and we're used to engaging with it and how it's been used to frame our world. Whereas like, I feel like the more that whole conceptualization and understanding of aesthetics becomes mainstream, either through like greater sort of academic literature on the topic, or like practitioner literature, that's basically like, if a marketing magazine or marketing like firm or company does some like article on it, or thought leadership white paper type thing on it, then the more it will actually become part of the marketing practice. So it's almost like the things I've been explaining, I feel like it will become a bit more baked into like how we teach marketing and advertising, and how we like study it, and how we approach it like as a discipline, like formally. And that's just because, social media marketing is becoming such a key pillar of the whole, like, of any marketing campaign, and the way we kind of conceptualize marketing. Because obviously, I don't need to tell you that, the internet is a large part of our lives. I feel like that's a well trodden path for a lot of shows about business and about marketing, and even just in general. I think a lot of people are aware, they understand. So I don't have to go into that. But I'm really excited to see, like, on the one hand, there's that, like, it becoming more mainstream from that being picked up by, like, academics and things like that. But then also there's the fact of, like, it becoming more mainstream simply by virtue of, like, millennials or Gen Z, and eventually, like, Gen Alpha entering academia in terms of, like, a professional capacity, and like, be it like a lecturer capacity or thought leadership capacity. And I think that's so exciting. Like, I think it's just going to be I don't know, it's just going to be a really fun thing to kind of dissect. And I almost wish we could see, like, what kind of unique perspective will come out of trying to analyze and understand and, like, break down a practice and a way of engaging with the world that your own brain has been, like, reshaped by, So it's like, how people say we don't know the effects of, just giving a random example, like YouTube on a toddler's brain or on a child's brain. Like, if you grow up watching YouTube every day, hours of YouTube and stuff like that, we don't know the effects of that, because obviously it's just like recent generations that have had access to that technology, because YouTube is, it's not 30 years old. So like it's not even 30 years old is what I mean. So it's just like totally sort of untrodden territory that academia will get to explore, and like industry leaders will get to explore and dissect and, like, base their strategies off of. And I guess it could be a bit, like, oh, people are using my, like, personal experience against me in terms of, like, engineering their product to appeal more to me on a subconscious level, so that I buy things I don't actually want, but I feel like I want them. But yeah, I just somehow also feel that's really cool. I mean, it's really cool. And I suppose in my defense, you could say, why not understand that for yourself, so you can better equip yourself to, like, resist it. If it's going to be something that's inevitable, yes, on one hand, I do believe in, like, standing against practices that are explicitly, like, exploitative, that are wrong, that are, heartless and immoral and stuff. But I also feel like this practice could be done responsibly, and the more we understand it as consumers, and maybe even, like, consumers and future practitioners, then the more we can put in place the frameworks and, like, the infrastructure to make it responsibly practiced, if you understand, Yeah, so it's definitely an exciting time in terms of aesthetics, and just the effects of aesthetics on, like, a growing mind and a growing, like, person. and what that will look like for the adults of the future. Yeah, and I guess current adults, because we are adults. And yeah, that's just, I just like thinking about stuff like that, because it's happening all around you. It's happening in real time, but obviously day to day, you may not see the like evolution of it or the effects of it. But I feel like looking back to like 2018, as I said before in the beginning of the radio show, like maybe it's just me personally, but I didn't really see a lot of all those aesthetics like cottagecore or like princess core or any other core that you can think of. Like I just saw the whole rise of like streetwear and like skater culture becoming more mainstream and things like that. That could be another episode, by the way, because I feel like that was a huge thing, especially in Lagos where I was at the time. Like I feel like that really permeated the high school zeitgeist, and I'm guessing that it also was the same in other countries and other cities as well. So I think that would be an interesting one to dissect. And yeah, what was I even saying before? No, it was something really, really good. So I talked about the effects in real time. Yes. So what I meant to say was that, so seeing those changes in like the late 2010s, right? You looking back from now, like 2023, you can kind of chart the sort of not evolution of a trend, because obviously it's not the same cultural trend that somehow morphed from like streetwear into aesthetics. It's kind of like concurrent things and like seeds of things coinciding with like a more mature trend at the particular moment, and then another trend kind of like subsides and another one like starts developing and growing more, and it's all these things that kind of intertwine like sort of flowers or vines kind of all meshed together, and then you as a person experiencing it, or looking back rather from now, you're looking at that tangle of vines and you're like, huh, wow, like that was a time. It was truly a time in life and truly a phenomenon. So yeah, I just think that's very, very cool. And so yeah, I suppose to kind of cap off everything, aesthetics, in my opinion, are just a tool for the person who wants to engage with them. Like, obviously, with the fact that they come with like a community built in, a sense of identity and belonging and things, it's easy to sort of to almost like relinquish that sort of, I don't know, give it a certain power that it doesn't, not that it doesn't need to have, but that, you may find is more detrimental than like helpful and like useful for your own, like a tool for you to like individuate and like express your identity and things. But definitely, like just as with the internet and with technology and with, I don't know, even skills like writing, for example, I feel like it's it's just something that as a consumer I'm trying to be more and more mindful of, like when I engage with those things, in that they are tools to help me, and I'm not a facet of that. I'm not a component or cog within that social construct of like an aesthetic or a subgroup or anything like that, like socially. So I feel like the more I do that, the more empowered I feel, and the more like of an individual I feel. Like I just feel like, as much as I love the discovery element and like exploration and understanding other people's perspective of things, and like getting a snapshot, or like a snapshot of their world and their life and way of like engaging with it, I do feel like it can be draining if that's only perspective or stance that you kind of are in, at least for me. But then the more that I sort of think, like take a minute to switch from like one system of thinking to another system, again, like shout out to behavioral decision making module. So the more that I switch systems, the more I'm reminding myself, okay, like, this is just a thing. It's not like like it's just a construct, you know. It's just a thing that people have made, and it's something that people have made to feel happy and to serve them in that sense. It's not like something that should inflict stuff that I don't want onto me, you know? And that's just, I find that very empowering. Yeah, so it's just a varied thing. It's a nuanced thing, and I think that it's useful, especially in terms of like, for example, on BRAIDAR, you can search by aesthetic. But I thought it would be very valuable for me to like share some of my thoughts on just the constructs themselves and just to clarify certain things, because in having it on the site, I do not want to like sort of reinforce the negative or the what's it called, suppressive side of the rise of aesthetics. It's more so like tapping into the usefulness and the fact that people may be interested in that, and that might help them to just express their individuality. And again, like the whole idea of BRAIDAR is for people to be able to tap into things that make them feel like themselves, whether that's braided hairstyles, whether that's like particular style of nails, like wigs, like lashes, brows, whatever makes you feel like you should have access to it in like your institution. It shouldn't be something that is prohibitive, like, or that is a reason, like, you know, that shouldn't be an obstacle. We have enough obstacles as it is in life, you know, that shouldn't be one of them, especially if, again, as I said before, there are people around and in the community who can meet that need exceptionally well, like super talented people with like different beauty side hustles. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. It's been a really fun time, and I'm really excited for next week as well. And yeah, I will definitely, if you're interested in more of the BRAIDAR content, our first episode is on the Instagram page. So that's BRAIDAR _ on Instagram. And if you're interested in more of the content in terms of you want to watch previous episodes of the show, be sure to send a direct message to the page, because I am experimenting with different ways of putting the episodes out there. And I'm not sure if I want to go with a more segmented, like short clips from each episode, or putting the full episodes onto the page. But you guys just let me know what you would prefer. And, you know, if you've got questions and things like that, or want to discuss more, I'm more than happy to. This is just a really fun sort of passion project for me. So yeah, I am looking forward to hearing from you guys again. Have a lovely, you know, rest of the weekend, and I will see you next Saturday, 3 p.m.